Hello, hello, and welcome back to yet another continuation in ranking every single team. And that's just exactly what we don't just talk about the Cowboys or the Eagles or the Chiefs. I talk about every team because every team is interesting. At least in the offseason they are. I mean, I'm not going to make any promises here that in the middle of November I'm going to still be talking about teams like the same. But we're not talking about those teams right now because we have ascended into the level of where I'm expecting them to either be competing for the playoffs or be competing to win games. So let's get into all of these teams who I think have high expectations heading into the 2025 season. As always, thank you for watching. Let me pull it up here for you. Trusty Google Slides as I like to share my screen right here. All right. Last time I left off with a shortened video discussing just two teams, but today we are discussing 13 through number 11, and we start off with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this might be controversial rankings here, but quite frankly, wherever I would have had the Vikings, there would have been extreme arguments on opposite sides. I feel like well, at least based off of last season, right? Because they won 14 games. This feels like a low rank. However, I think the Vikings are the toughest team to rank in the NFL. If you take a look at their coach in their overall roster, and especially looking back to what they were last season, you would think that this is a really good playoff team with the chance to maybe even win a Super Bowl. But then you take into account they have a quarterback who's never played a single snap in the NFL, who I personally was not high on at all coming out of college. And I think they're going to have to look very different next year offensively as a result of this quarterback change. So they took a massive step backwards at the most important position in the sport. So I can't really rank them much higher than this. And this is quite frankly, this is kind of at the bottom of the teams where I think they can win a Super Bowl. I guess actually the Rams would be one spot below this, but with their a glaring weakness there for the Rams. But the Vikings at 13. By the way, this is not taken into account to my rankings at all, like the schedule next year. But brother, the Vikings have a brutal schedule, as one might expect because they were so good last year. But I mean, they play 8 games against my top 6 teams. Think about what I just said. They play 8 games against the 6 teams that I think are the best in the NFL. That is brutal. Like that is it's just really difficult. So I also think that the Vikings, like if they have a winning record next year, that would be a major accomplishment. Like I would give JJ McCarthy and the Vikings all the credit they deserve if they go 9-8 next year. A lot of people, especially in the media, would classify that I think as a disappointment because they won 14 games last year. But brother, if they can walk in there with a brand new QB who's never played before and come out on top of this brutal schedule, I absolutely would. And by the way, if they do win 8 games or 9 games next year, they will probably be the best 8 or 9 win team in the league by far. So let's talk a little bit about the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell as the head coach, I think he kind of has established himself coming off of that Sean McVay, branch of head coaches. He's been successful with the Vikings, multiple different quarterbacks, now looking to make the playoffs with a third different quarterback at the helm. They had a top 12 defense and offense last season. And let's go into what made them so good. Obviously, have to start off with Sam Darnold here. He was a top 6 quarterback last season. Okay, it's undeniable. If I brought up everybody's stats, he was much better than Patrick Mahomes. He was better in the regular season than Jalen Hurts. Like he was better than really good. He was better than Brock Purdy last season. Like a lot of quarterbacks that float around that top range, he was simply better than last season. He wasn't at an all pro level because that was the Lamar Jacksons, Josh Allen, Joe Burrows of the world, but he certainly was a pro bowler. And I really think people are kind of overlooking how good he was last year, and they're really underestimating how difficult it will be to replace him because I would bet every penny I have J.J. McCarthy does not come close to this level of play next season. And it's okay. He doesn't have to because obviously the Vikings are going to have to change the way they play. They're not going to, I promise you, they're not going to throw, what is that, 548 passes next year. It's just not going to happen. They're going to become a run first team. heavy on the play action. Obviously, you got the weapons. I mean, you still have a elite group of talented players. I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson, one of, if not the best receivers in football. Jordan Addison has certainly proven himself in his 2 seasons in the NFL. TJ Hawkinson, when he's healthy, is he a top five, top six tight end? I think there's a strong case for that. And then Aaron Jones with a bounce back season, kind of saving his career last year. He fumbled too much. He needs to clean up the fumbling issue. But I mean, 1,500 plus yards from scrimmage. I don't think a lot of people are expecting that out of Aaron Jones last year, and I expect him to get even more touches the following season. And obviously, they need to lean more on the run game. And they also have one of the top pass rushes defensively. There was a stat, I think it was towards the middle of last season, where they were the best team against third down because they got after the quarterback so well. Andrew Van Ginkel had a breakout season for the Vikings last year. They pretty much traded Jonathan Grenard for Daniil Hunter. And hey, I'm not saying Grenard is Daniil Hunter, but he had 12 sacks last year, 22 QB hits, 18 TFLs. They traded an all-pro level pass rusher, and they still came out with a pretty good player at just 27 years of age. So the Vikings defense is very dangerous, and they're like it's a good roster. It's a really good roster. It's just it's a massive question mark at the quarterback position, and I have no idea what to think about it because I don't really think it's fair to me to base my opinion on of JJ McCarthy off of what he was in college because he's 2 years removed from that now, and the talent around him is loaded, right? So it's difficult to say, right? So let's go over to this depth chart. Um, Upgrades on both lines of scrimmage here was the key talking point of this offseason, I feel like. And let's actually break that down here. Let me scroll over to the Vikings offensive line for you because obviously I have taken notes and kind of broken down every single team's offensive line here. If you will let me scroll to it here, give me a second. Where are the Vikings at? Here they are. So at the left tackle position, you still have Christian Darrisaw. He did not play a whole lot of snaps last season, but however, when he was out there, he was playing at a very high level. Over an 80 grade from PFF overall, only allowed 2 sacks. Now, you do have Donovan Jackson starting at that left guard position, kind of the surprise pick from them in the first round, but it makes sense because they're completely overhauling the interior of that offensive line, which struggled massively in their sole playoff game against the Rams. So you bring in Donovan Jackson. I like him starting at the left guard position. I expect him to be a plus starter for you, definitely above average as a rookie. They bring in 2 players from the Colts, both who missed time last season due to injury. And quite frankly, if you look at the Vikings offensive line going into the next season, they only had 1 player who played more than 601 snaps last season. So that's a major concern. I mean, is this starting five on the offensive line going to remain healthy the whole year? I doubt it. But the 2 guys they brought from the Colts, Ryan Kelly, the center, above average last season in his 600 snaps that he played. Only 1 sack allowed. A longtime starter for the Colts seems to be a massive upgrade over Garrett Bradbury. And then Will Fries, a very coveted, sought after player at the right guard position. He got offered a ton of money from multiple teams. He only played about a quarter of the snaps last year in Indianapolis. But here's the thing, he was graded incredibly high, damn near an all pro level in the limited snaps that he did play. So he looks like the real deal, as well as Ryan Kelly. So these look like 2 major additions and 2 major upgrades for that matter on the interior. And then, of course, you got Brian O'Neill coming back. He was a Pro Bowl level right tackle for you, played 1,100 snaps last season. And when he was out there, he played at a high level, only 2 sacks allowed. So across the board, this looks like a massively upgraded offensive line and one of the better ones in the NFL if they can stay healthy. Talking about quickly some of these other position groups offensively, is this the best receiver duo in football? They certainly have a strong case for it. I mean, Jefferson being arguably number one, and then Jordan Addison doing what he's done his first 2 seasons. It's hard to find many options that are better. I like Jalen Naylor as a wide receiver 3, and I think drafting Ty Felton out of Maryland, I believe, is also kind of a slept-on move. He could, make a couple plays for them, splash plays next season. I already mentioned TJ Hawkinson. I love him if he's healthy. And they also make the trade for Jordan Mason out of San Francisco. He was very good for the first 2 months of the season for the Niners last year until McCaffrey came back. So if they do lean more into that run game, I think we're going to see Jordan Mason get a lot of action next year. So, like I said earlier, man, good offense. I would even go as far as say a better offense than last season when they were top 12. So, but at like the whole conversation with the Vikings, of course, comes back around to the quarterback play. Now let's talk about the defense here a little bit because they bring in several guys, several big time moves here. Jonathan Allen from the Commanders, long time defensive player there. When he's healthy, he's played at a Pro Bowl level. The question is, can they get healthy? Jonathan Allen. And same situation, exact situation with Javon Hargrave. They bring him in from the 49ers. His first year in San Fran, he was a really good player. Looked like the player that was a difference maker for the Eagles, but he missed a lot of time with injuries last season. We don't know what kind of version he's going to bring, but if both of those guys can be at least 90% of what they used to be, then the Vikings have a scary defensive line. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Renard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and by the way, Dallas Turner. Listen, Dallas Turner in that 2024 draft was talked about as the consensus best defensive player in the draft. I think the reason they were so comfortable with letting Patrick Jones walk in free agency is because they just expect Dallas Turner to jump up and replace that production. So they have a scary front seven. Also, Ivan Pace, Blake Cashman as your stand up linebackers. I love the Vikings front seven. Now, their secondary, that's where I have some question marks here because you lose Cam Bynum to the Colts. He was a big time safety for your last season. I mean, you replace him with Josh Metellus. That's without a doubt a downgrade, in my opinion. Also, Harrison Smith getting up there. And hey, I mean, how old is Harrison Smith at this point? Let's see. 36. Are you comfortable with 36-year-old Harrison Smith being your best safety? Vikings fans probably say yes, but I have some concerns about that. And then your cornerback room, well, you lose Stephon Gilmore, who still was a big difference maker for you last season. He's still a free agent, if I'm not mistaken. I would go bring him back in a heartbeat. I mean, you bring in Isaiah Rodgers, Jeff Okudah, Tavier Thomas. Are you comfortable with that? I'm not at all. I have massive question marks about this Viking secondary. I think Harrison Smith, Mekhi Blackman, and Byron Murphy all should be good, if not really good. But that other safety position as well as your starting boundary corner opposite of Mekhi Blackman could cause some trouble for you. So listen, I do expect them to be top 15, top 12, maybe defensively, and one of the best offenses on paper. But I guess I'm erring on the side of caution when it comes to JJ McCarthy and how good they're going to look. And also, the schedule is just insane. Like I mentioned it earlier, but like if the Vikings go 7-10 next year, it's not because they suck. It's because they just simply were not ready to face like this is a Super Bowl level. Like the Eagles should be playing a schedule like this, but the Vikings, man, with a fresh quarterback, it's going to be tough, man. And I think McCarthy's going to have a lot of really bad games against some good teams. And I, I'm going to make a point, a conscious effort not to be too reactionary to McCarthy next season. I'm going to try and take the good with the bad and look at his season overall rather than picking out some of his worst. Because listen when I tell you this, he's going to look terrible at points next season because anybody would with how bad, some of their opponents are or how good rather, how bad it is for them. But I'm gonna try and be a little bit patient with the Vikings because honestly, next year should be the worst year of McCarthy's career if he is what they think he is. If you know what I'm saying there. So yeah, I got the Vikings at 13 going into next season. Here are the overall position upgrades, downgrades. Obviously, you got worse at quarterback, receiver the same, running back. I like the Jordan Mason addition. Tight end remains the same. O line, 3 new additions, 2 upgrades in terms of center and right guard. Defensive line, bring in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, also Dallas Turner, taking another step forward. Linebacker remains the same, but their secondary, I did mention, you lose 2 key stars there. So worried about how that's going to look for them next season. Moving on now. My Seattle Seahawks at number 12. Now, listen, I do not know why this is or how it happens, but it feels to me, maybe as a biased Seahawks fan, that the Seahawks every single offseason, especially since Russ left, have been wildly underrated. And I feel like we exceed expectations every single year, but it's like a constant cycle here. It's like doubt the Seahawks preseason, they exceed your expectations regular season, but they do nothing in the playoffs if they make the playoffs. By the way, we won 10 games last year, didn't even make the playoffs. I feel like if you ask people, like just the average casual football fan, how many games the Seahawks won last year, they'd probably tell you 7 or 8. We won 10 games last year in Mike McDonald's first year as the head coach. Now, the number one storyline with the Seahawks, similar to the Vikings, is their change at quarterback. Good news is for us, we have the old Vikings quarterback, who, like I said earlier, was a top 6 quarterback in football. And by the way, I came up with that determination before Sam Darnold signed with the Seahawks. I was praising him for how well he played well before we even were interested or linked to him. And we still had Geno Smith. So I'm not trying to boost up Sam Darnold retroactively because he signed with my favorite team. It's just a fact. Sam Darnold was great last year with the Vikings. Now, similar to Geno Smith, Sam Darnold has only shined in one unique situation. Now, here's the thing about Geno Smith. I feel like there's a group of football fans who think Geno's a scrub and he shouldn't be a starter. Those fans are objectively wrong. He has proved them wrong the last 3 seasons, so I don't care about their opinion. The rest of the football community, I think, is split on is he just an average bridge quarterback? Is he a good starter for a year or two? Can he win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith? I was never I guess I varied because he was so inconsistent in his time in Seattle. At certain points, he looked like a Pro Bowl, and he was a multiple time Pro Bowl. He looked like a Pro Bowl, all pro level quarterback. Then other games, it's like, man, what are we doing with Geno out there? But I think the crux of the matter is we were never good enough with Geno at the helm. I mean, we were a top 12 defense last season, but a dead average offense, and it felt like we were always just average with Geno. And I feel like a lot of fans in his first year in 2022, Geno Smith, this is, he was really good. He was a top 10 quarterback. He was a bona fide Pro Bowler, all of that. So I think a lot of fans kind of just think all three of the years were like that first season in 2022. That was not the case. He took a major step backwards in 2023, and 2024 is more of the same. He was not at that level these last 2 seasons. I think a lot of people don't understand that. So if we're comparing 2022 Geno to Sam Darnold, it's more of a a good comparison. But Sam Darnold last year to Geno Smith the last 2 years, not even close. And by the way, he's like what 7, 8 years younger than Geno on top of that. So in my opinion, it is not deniable that we upgraded the quarterback position. Okay, so I that's the way I'm looking at this, and basing a lot of my rankings based off that assumption. Now, we need a more balanced offense going forward. We were under 100 rushing yards per game. And I feel like that's not the first time that's happened in the last couple of years. We have an insanely talented running back room. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh. We just drafted Damian Martinez. We have all the firepower in the world to be, I would say, a top 10 run game in the league. But it's like, I just feel like the coaching has been all wrong. The offensive line obviously has been a major struggle for us for years. We allowed 50 sacks last year on Geno Smith. The offensive line simply needs to get better. I hope it's going to get better because that's the message we sent via the draft. We're going to get to that, but I do think with the new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak coming in, hopefully we can lean on the run game a little bit more and therefore make Sam Donald's job easier because I mean, let's just call it like it is. He does not have as many weapons with the Seahawks as he had last year with the Vikings, i.e., Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. I think, JSN probably is better than Jordan Addison, but he's no Justin Jefferson, So Sam Darnold is getting a less talented group to work with, but hopefully we can provide him with a stable run game to make that transition easier. Now let's get to the stats right here. If you look at Geno right there, and here's the thing, take a good look, a good, strong look at some of Geno's numbers, okay? 21 touchdowns, 15 picks, 93 passer rating, okay? Take a good, strong look at his numbers at the very top of your screen right there. 3, 2, 1. Let's go over to what Sam Darnold was. 7 years younger than Geno Smith, 35 touchdowns, 12 picks, 102.5 passer rating. Like I said, guys, it's not rocket science here. Sam Darnold was simply way better than Geno last year. However, Geno, 4 fourth quarter comebacks, 4 game winning drives. Sam Darnold, 3 fourth quarter comebacks, 5 game winning drives. So it's actually the same if you add them up. But listen, I think I've made my point. I think if you're a reasonable person, you would agree. Sam Darnold is an upgrade over Geno Smith. Let's talk about the weapons, though, because there's been some change here. Obviously, the Seahawks move on from DK Metcalf. They get younger, they get cheaper. We were not going to pay DK what the Steelers paid him. And credit to DK. If he knew his worth. He knew that there were going to be some teams out there that were willing to pay him $30 million a year for 5 years, and the Steelers were willing to do that. So, congrats to him. It's no bad blood there. We got a second round pick, and we potentially drafted his replacement. So, it is what it is. But does it hurt the Seahawks next year losing DK? Yes, it does. But we bring in some other guys that we're going to get to, but let's talk about the key guys returning. We also lose Tyler Lockett, by the way, but I think it's kind of clear he was not what he used to be at the age of 32, only 600 yards last season. It's not a major loss, right? So we still have Jason, who does, I think, make a case to be a strong breakout candidate last year with over 1,100 yards, and he is our new number one receiver. And guys, I mean, if you're having over 1,100 yards at 22 years old, I would expect that you're going to be a bona fide number one receiver for years to come. Is that unreasonable? I don't think it is. Zach Charbonnet also, I think, kind of took over as our number one running back. Now, K9 missed a lot of time, right? He missed 6 games. Zach played all 17 games. So if you look at per game numbers, there's a major difference there. But Zach was there. He was available. And I liked a lot of what I saw out of him. K9 only had 3.7 yards per carry. I think, they do things kind of differently, but they're both talented players. I like to see what both of them can do going into next season. Tight end, Noah Fant had 500 yards in 14 games. Could he take another step forward? I'm not sure. But defensively, like I said, we were top 12 last year. Mike McDonald made a noticeable difference in his first year. We had breakout performances from guys like Julian Love. I think Tyrese Knight, the rookie, played good for us. Leonard Williams, what a move that was to acquire him. 11 sacks last year, 28 QB hits. He was a bona fide Pro Bowler for us as well. I mean, the defense, we're kind of, listen, we're going to get to it. The Seahawks are kind of loaded defensively. A lot of people are talking about our secondary being the best in the NFC. I would not deny that, but our front seven has some ballers on that we're going to get to, by the way. Make no mistake, I'm going to talk about exactly why I love this defense so much. But let's talk about the offense first. So obviously, I'll set it before, I've said it again. Sam Darnold is the X factor for this team. The running back room is uber talented. Let's talk about the receivers, though, because we bring in Cooper Kupp from the Rams. He has dealt with massive, and I do mean massive, injury concerns over the last few seasons. He had the best, and listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. He had the best wide receiver season ever in 2021. Ever. In the history of football, he had the best season ever in 2021. Triple Crown, Super Bowl MVP. Best season ever. Since then, he has dealt with major injury concerns, and he's never seemed to play more than like 12 games a year. Even if he does only give us 12 games next season, I think he's still an upgrade over Tyler Lockett as our slot receiver, right? I think that's fairly easy to agree upon. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Now, you might laugh at this if you're not familiar with what he did with the Saints last year. By the way, keep in mind, he comes over with Clint Kubiak, also from the Saints. I think Clint Kubiak really liked what he saw out of MVS in limited time in New Orleans. By the way, some terrible, absolutely abominable quarterback play on the Saints last year. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was still making a bunch of plays as a deep threat. I think that'll be his role with the Seahawks as well next year. Let's talk about some of the additions we make via the draft. Okay, Elijah Arroyo, who we spent a second round pick on, I expect him to immediately slot in as our tight end too. He was a big time play machine at Miami with the Hurricanes last year, and I expect over time for him also to build into a similar role with us as well. We draft multiple receivers, Torrey Horton, Ricky White. I think if injuries take place to MVS or Cooper Kupp, one of those guys kind of emerge and break out as our wide receiver three. I like our top six. I really like the Seahawks top six in terms of receivers. We have a real top two, and then it's a bunch of guys who I think are reliable, and I would still be happy to see them on the field. Now let's get to the offensive line, which has been the cause of concern for many, many years for us poor Seahawks fans. If I could please scroll over to the correct team here. Okay, yes. So at left tackle, we return Charles Cross, our best offensive lineman without a shadow of a doubt. He was graded very highly on PFF last season. He did give up 6 sacks, but he still had an 82.5 overall grade on PFF, and he played nearly 1,100 snaps last season. He is a guy who apparently has been getting better and better each season. Remember, he was a top 10 pick, and it looks like going into a contract year, if I'm not mistaken, he could be poised for his best season yet. Now, left guard, one of my favorite picks in the entire draft, not just because I'm a Seahawks fan. I was clamoring, begging for the Seahawks to draft Bryce Abel out of North Dakota State, and we did. He is a mauler, a physical freak in the interior of the offensive line. He moves people in the run game. He was elite, dominant even at the D2 level. Who knows how he's going to look against grown men in the NFL, but I'll say this confidently. He will be a massive upgrade for us at the left tackle position. Olu Oluwatimi played about 435 snaps last year, gave up 0 sacks, which is impressive to me. Good run blocker. He needs to develop, right? He was a fifth round pick 2 years ago, and he's not a finished product yet. But in limited action, I like what I saw at him last year. I want to see what he does in a full season as a starting position. Christian right guard. The right guard's a concern. I have no idea who's going to play right guard for us. Here's the interesting thing. Christian Haynes was the consensus best interior offensive, well, best guard prospect in the draft last year. And he was terrible. He only played 167 snaps. And when he was out there, he was bad. So either the entire league was wrong in terms of how good he was, or um, he hopefully just takes a massive leap and he is a good right guard for us. But I have my doubts heavily about that right guard position. And then the right tackle, Abraham Lucas, dealt with massive injury concerns last season. It affected his play. He was not nearly as good as he was in 2023. Hopefully, he gets over that, comes back healthy, and we have a really good pair of starting tackles. So, major question marks all over the offensive line. And typically, whenever I have question marks about an offensive line, they typically perform pretty bad. It's still going to be the overall thing holding this offense back if I had to bet money. But I do think we're moving in the right direction with a. Oh, by the way, every single one of our offensive linemen are still on their rookie contract, right? So how about we give them a year or two to actually develop and hopefully get better over time, right? It's an incredibly young group of offensive linemen. Now let's talk a little bit about this adore and I am in love with. Scroll back over to that real quick. So defensively, we have 5 to 6 dangerous pass rushes. We bring in Demarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys, Leonard Williams from the Pro Bowler last year, Jerron Reed. Let me bring up. He's an older guy. How old is Jerron Reed now? He's 32. Still had 4.5 sacks last year as one of the better pass rushing interior defensive linemen. Also, Uchenna Nwosu coming back off of injury. Boye Mafe, Derek Hall. We have dangerous guys who can get after the quarterback. Also, spent a first round pick on Byron Murphy last year. God forbid, if he develops, dangerous. Dangerous front seven. Mike McDonald absolutely knows how to get multiple guys coming off the edge. He knows how to get after the quarterback, and he showed that last year with breakout performances from multiple players in our front seven. We made a trade for Ernest Jones midseason. I like what he did for us. We decided to re-sign him for a sizable amount of money. Also, the fourth round rookie, Tyrese Knight, showed a lot of promise himself. So I really like our front seven, but I think the position group where most teams give us our credit is the group of secondary. So Josh Jobe, listen, I was hating on Josh Jobe heavily when we picked him off the street because I remember on the Eagles, he was not really good in his time in Philly. But for some reason, some way, somehow, he looked really good after we picked him up down the stretch last season. And listen, he's our projected starting boundary cornerback. I don't love I don't that, but hey, if he's our number 5 DB, I guess I can't be upset with that. Now let's get to the rest of the guys. Devon Witherspoon, Rick Woolen, both have been Pro Bowlers already in their young career. Rick Woolen, I think, is one of the top 10, top 12 cornerbacks in the entire league. Devon Witherspoon, arguably the best nickelback in football. And our group of safeties, we got 3 dominant. Well, let me calm down. I'm kind of hyping us up too bit. I love Julian Love. He does everything you need out of a safety. He can play in the nickel. He causes turnovers. He does everything. I love Julian Love. He's our best safety in my opinion. Kobe Bryant kind of saved his career last season. I guess he just found a good role in Mike McDonald's in defense rather, and he kind of saved his career. And then we drafted Nick Emenwari in the second round. And listen, I'm not saying Kyle Hamilton 2.0, but it appears that's exactly how Mike McDonald wants to use him. He fits that mold to a T. He's an athletic fucking monster, one of the most like ridiculous athletes ever to test at the combine. And yeah, he looks to be an exceptional box safety. So we'll see exactly what ways Mike McDonald's going to use him. But it slots out to be a dangerous secondary paired up with a very versatile, aggressive front seven. And if we're not a top 10 defense next year, that should be a disappointment, honestly. And a 10-win season also. I mean, as long as Darnold does not disappoint, I think 10 wins is almost a guarantee for the Seahawks back to back seasons. So I love our team. I think we're top 12. A lot of people probably think we're like 15, 16, 17. I could not disagree with them more. We are a really good team next season. And here are the position groups. We got better at quarterback, wide receiver. We lose DK Metcalf, lose Tyler Lockett. We get worse overall. Running back remains the same. Tight end, why did I put a down arrow there? There was supposed to be an up arrow on tight end because we add Elijah Arroyo to that position group. Offensive line gets better, defensive line gets better. Linebacker, I think, gets better because we enter the season now with Tyrese Knight and Ernest Jones, whereas we did not have really either of those guys starters at the beginning of last season. Safety gets better. We add Nico and Rory. Cornerback room remains the same. So overall, really good team. Should win 10 games next year. Now, number 11. we have the Houston Texans. Now, they're a confusing franchise in terms of their philosophy, right? Because they hit home runs with their quarterback, CJ Stroud, that we drafted 2 years ago, and their head coach, D'Amico Ryans. Now, there's probably some ESPN stat out there about, head coaches who came into a team and won a playoff game their first 2 seasons with a rookie quarterback. There's probably some ridiculous ESPN stat that D'Amico Ryans fits into, but I cannot think of a head coach who came into a situation and instantly turned them into a playoff contender after being terrible for years and years on end, like that Ryans has done with the Houston Texans. Now, what I said was questionable about their philosophy is that they have a young quarterback. Now, that's not new. A lot of good teams right now have young quarterbacks on their rookie contracts, but if you look at a lot of those teams, they are aiming to rapidly improve their offensive line and their receiver room. The Texans are kind of going in the opposite direction. They're kind of downgrading at both of those areas, not necessarily by their choice, well, some by choice, but they're appearing to bulk up on their defense more than their offense. And I kind of think it's doing a disservice to CJ Stroud because he only has 2 years left on this rookie deal. Now he has a fifth year option that they're probably going to accept, but I feel like in order to really maximize what you can do with a quarterback on a rookie contract, you kind of have to put a group of talent around him offensively that can complement his game. I don't really feel like they've been doing that, and I feel like CJ's kind of taking the punishment in terms of the amount of hits he's been taking and sacks overall. And I think you saw that last year where he took a step backwards compared to his rookie season, which they call it a sophomore slump. I mean, I guess it hit CJ last year because they've been choosing defense over offense, and I think it showed itself last season because they had terrible offensive line play and they were below average overall as an offense. Now, a big part of that is because they lost Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell midseason. And I mean, their whole group of guys. I mean, Joe Mixon missed time, Nico Collins missed time, Diggs and Tank Dell both suffered season ending injuries. So they were crippled kind of last year by the injury bug. But I was really disappointed with what I saw out of them last year offensively. And CJ Stroud was sacked. Let's get to it. 52 times, according to Pro Football Reference. And if you look at the numbers overall, I mean, he was worse than Geno Smith. And that's coming from a Seahawks fan. So only one fourth quarter comeback, 2 game-winning drives. Now, listen, they were elite defensively. Like, they really were one of the better defenses last year, top 10, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, they have stars, several. We're going to get to them, several stars on this defense. But look at it. Outside of Joe Mixon and Nico Collins, who did they have by the end of the season? Dalton Schultz, Robert Woods out there. I mean, it was rough. It was undeniably rough. They did not have the answers to come up with after their top guys went down with injury, and I think that showed. Now, they make some additions to hopefully add to the overall depth, but their top end talent on the offense is questionable. And I also really don't understand the move when you trade your best offense. Like, keep in mind, this was a bad offensive line last year, and you trade your best offensive lineman, Laramie Tunsil, to the Commanders for they got a several picks, but it's not like it was a trade that you have to make. That's a choice they made to get rid of Laramie Tunsil. And listen, I think he led the league in penalties. By the way, he was not a great player last year, but I mean, he is way better. He is worth at least two other of your offensive line starters. So to move him for seemingly no reason, I have some questions about that. I don't really understand it. Now, defensively, in terms of the guys you bring back, well, let me start with the offense, actually. Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, proven commodities, all pro level players. They're at the top of the game, respectively, and they're in each of their positions. Now, I got half a dozen question marks as in terms of weapons around them. Okay, and we're going to get to some of those guys. But defensively, 4 to 5 Pro Bowlers. I mean, let's just get to them. Derek Stingley, breakout season, one of the best cornerbacks in football. Daniil Hunter, 12 sacks, 23 QB hits in his first season there. Pro Bowler without a shadow of a doubt. Will Anderson, a monster. Definitely worth the top 3 pick they spent on him the last couple of years. What's it called? Rookies. Kalen Bullock and Kamari Lassiter both showing up and balling out in each of their rookie seasons. Kalen Bullock had 5 picks. Kamari Lassiter was a stud. I mean, Aziz Al-Shaair showed up, Jalen Petrie, and they dealt with some injuries on the defense too. Let's be clear on that. But man, when they were out there and they were healthy, they were completely shutting teams down. I think what they did to the Bears last year, I think it was week 2, they shut them down terribly. So I love what I see out of the Texans defensively. Let's talk about some of the areas where they could improve on the offense. The main question for me is which of these receivers step up? Right, they got three new guys there, two teammates from Iowa State, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. I think Jaden Higgins is the guy who's gotten a lot more hype coming out of the draft. I think a lot of his comparisons actually were to Nico Collins, kind of a similar body type. They also bring in Christian Kirk from the Jaguars, which I think is a really underrated move. Just look at 2 seasons ago, how good Christian Kirk was with the Jags. He had a down year last year, but it's like him and Evan Ingram, I think, are in similar positions where they weren't good last year, but the whole Jags sucked. Like Trevor Lawrence sucked last year. So it's like they're only 1 year removed from being really good weapons. So I think Christian Kirk, if he gets back healthy and he looks like what he did in 2022 or 2023, that's a good player. That's a good number two receiver for you. So they got real good depth at the position. Also, John Mechie, Xavier Hudson, they've each been on this team for a couple years now. I mean, they're like going to be kind of condemned as wide receiver fours or fives, but I actually like him. Contrary to a lot of people, I guess. But they have solid depth here. They got a top six of guys that I'm interested in. The question mark is which one of them kind of emerge as the reliable starters going forward. I mean, you bring back Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover. I like that duo right there. The running back room, you add in Nick Chubb. Now, is he a big difference maker at this point? No, I don't really think so. Is he an upgrade over Damian Pierce and Wale? I do think that he is an upgrade. So I'm interested in that duo between Mixon and Nick Chubb. And I mean, CJ, is last year the outlier? Is it a sophomore slump, or is there a stage even further than that they don't want to see that he actually ends up reaching this year? I'm really not sure. Major uh, turning point year for CJ Stroud in terms of how people view him around the league. Because he got a lot of credit, justifiably so, after his rookie season. Now, was that a flash in the pan, or can he kind of get back to that and be one of the best quarterbacks uh, in the NFL moving forward? Now, let's talk about this offensive line here. If I can scroll over to him. 1 second. Texans. Here we go. They got Cam Robinson playing left tackle. He played with both the Vikings and the Jaguars last season. Now, he played nearly 1,000 snaps last year, 13 penalties, 7 sacks. I do not like that. Still, even with that, he is an above average pass protector and about dead average, according to PFF. He is a major downgrade compared to Laramie Tunsil, but I guess they were willing to make that trade off. Now, left guard Titus Howard. Well, let me correct myself. Right guard Titus Howard played over 1,000 snaps last year. The only player on this Texans offensive line who played over 1,000 snaps from him last year. He was actually above average. I've seen a lot of hate for Titus Howard. He was a really good pass protector last year. So I think was he a tackle last year? I think he might have actually been a tackle. So maybe he moves positions here, but he is the most experienced offensive lineman that they have on this team in regards to their own team, guys who have been there. Jared Patterson, the new center, 2023 sixth round pick, played about 550 snaps last year. Good pass protector, struggles in the run game, and that's a trend, unfortunately, for Joe Mixon. His entire offensive line is not graded very highly in terms of run blocking, but Jared Patterson looks to be an upgrade as a pass protector. You would hope so, at least. And then Juice Scruggs, well, actually, he is looking like a backup guard, a swing guard, if you will. Played about 900 snaps for them last year. 5 sacks allowed, was below average kind of across the board. Not bad as a backup. They bring in Laken Tomlinson from my Seahawks. Now, I can tell you about him. He did not miss a snap. Laken Tomlinson, listen, he is a average, I would say dead average guard in the NFL, but he is an Iron Man. He does not miss, if I'm not mistaken, Laken Tomlinson has not missed a game in like 5 or 6 years. So they say the best ability is availability. Laken Tomlinson, he defines that excellently. I think, you know, if you're just looking for a guy who can be your fourth or fifth best lineman, be available, that's who Laken Tomlinson is. So I actually like that pickup for the Texans. Then right tackle Blake Fisher played about 300 snaps last year. He struggled, only 4 sacks allowed in under 400 snaps. That's not good. They should really pay a close eye on him. But he was a rookie last year, so hopefully he takes a step forward, as most young linemen do in year two. But I got major, major concerns about the Texans' offensive line. They were bad last year, and apparently they got worse through losing Laramie Tunsil. So that's not a good news there. But let's get back to this defense, which is very fun to talk about here. So Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, Danico Autry, Aziz Al-Shaair, Christian Harris, Derek Stingley. They bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I love Kalen Bullock and Lassiter from last year. Jalen Petrie. First of all, nobody is giving the Texans enough credit. I think a lot of people talk about the Ravens now, the Seahawks. I think the Texans have a strong case to be the best secondary in football. I mean, you got four guys who are still on their rookie contracts, balling out, and you bring in C.J. Gardner Johnson, who had like I don't know what it is. When he's with the Eagles, he's an All-Pro caliber player. When he's not with the Eagles, he struggles. If he can be what he was, man, that's a major pickup for them. I love their trio of linebackers between Shair Harris and To'o, and then their defensive line. I mean, obviously they're loaded just based off the fact of having Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter coming off opposite edges of each other. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I love the defense. Absolutely love the defense. Their interior defensive line might have some question marks, but they're loaded and they were top 10 last year. I expect them to be top five, top six next year. So can their defense carry a potentially lackluster offense? I'm not sure because they have no weaknesses on that side of the ball. They need development on their offensive line, notably from Juice Scruggs, Jarrett Patterson, and Blake Fisher. Um, it's a good mix of young studs and established vets on this team, but you know the offense has to take a step forward. You're not going to win a Super Bowl, in my opinion, with a below average offense. That's what they were last year, and they have to change that notion. A lot of that is going to come off of the play of C.J. Stroud potentially. Quarterback remains the same. Wide receiver does get worse, unfortunately, because you lose Tank Dell for the entire season, unfortunately, and also you lose Stephon Diggs. Running back remains the same. Tight end remains the same. Offensive line does get worse, but it's weird. They got worse talent wise, but they could play better because they were so bad last year. Defensive line gets or remains the same rather. Cornerback remains the same, but you bring in C.J. Gardner Johnson, which makes them better. Linebacker also gets better. Why is that? Why does linebacker get? Oh, you bring in E.J. Speed. I did not mention that. They bring in E.J. Speed from the Colts, and they have now four really good stand up linebackers. So yeah, really strong group of linebackers, really great defense overall, and that is why I have the Texans as my number 11 team. That is going to be it for this video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new. We will be back very shortly, breaking in to the top 10. All teams who are without a doubt Super Bowl contenders. So be on the lookout for that. And I will see y'all very shortly. Thank you. Have a good day. Peace.